Usually, at this point in a Sunday service, I or Reverend Katie would be standing up here saying, "Our congregation has been supported by the volunteered time and treasure of its members and friends since its founding in 1711. And there would be a rustle of coats and purses as everyone reaches for a wallet or checkbook and prepares for the offering. Our volunteer ushers would come forward and the collection bowls would pass from hand to hand along the pews, accumulating checks and envelopes and crumpled bills. There would be offertory music, something beautiful from Irina or the choir or one of our musicians. And once the bowls passed through everyone's hands, the ushers would retreat to count and safely secure what was gathered. But our morning today is slightly out of order. And we're not taking the offering just yet, because the offering is exactly what I want to speak on. It has struck me over my many Sundays here how automatic the response is to those familiar opening phrases. This is the time in our service when we ask for all of you, the modern stewards of this church, to give generously out of the blessings you've received in your life. Almost before these words are spoken, there's the rustle of everyone who knows what's coming next. It's in some very real sense embedded in the ritual of a Sunday morning, in the flow from hymn to meditation to reading. There's the offering, always there week after week, familiar, predictable, a part of what it means for us to go to church. Yet how much attention do we give to this element of our Sunday service? What is it that we hope to feel or think about during those 3 or 4 minutes of communal generosity? We've all heard, perhaps, that an unexamined life is not worth living, but as an aspiring minister, I especially believe that an unexamined ritual is not worth perpetuating. So let's not breeze past the offering today, swiftly passing the basket hand to hand. Instead, let's take the time to lift up this element of our weekly practice and examine it in the light of our collective care and attention. What does it mean that we do this? And why do we choose to do it this way? If we are not careful, even the most meaningful rituals can become something closer to a chore, a repeated gesture made because we have to, or because someone else expects it of us, and not because we ourselves choose for it to be this way. I know some who have expressed their discomfort with the practice of taking an offering, worried it might come off as unwelcoming to visitors. It might drive people away or breed resentment. Some who experience the practice as a materialistic intrusion into an otherwise spiritual time, a jarring reminder of the practical, bringing us out of the warm and caring space of our shared candles and into a place that feels far less sacred. Now, I have to admit something. I almost never carry cash with me. So I've had several experiences myself when I'm at church and it comes time for the offering to be collected. I reach for my wallet, remember I have no cash and certainly don't have a checkbook, and feel suddenly guilty and embarrassed. As I pass the basket on to my neighbor with nothing to put in it, I avoid eye contact. Or else I make too much eye contact, trying to somehow communicate that I'm not intentionally refusing to contribute, and I give in other ways, I swear. It's just that I didn't come prepared. It isn't a feeling of resentment toward the church I'm visiting, more a feeling of self-consciousness, being the odd one out, wanting to join in and not being able, like not knowing the words to the hymns that everyone else can already sing from memory. I know that New England has a reputation for being stoic and even maybe a little avoidant when it comes to talking about feelings, maybe especially feelings about money. But I'm a strong believer that where there are unsettled and half-articulated emotions, best to turn all the way toward them and get them out into the light. So for this, I'm going to ask you to turn inward and reflect on your own impressions of this shared ritual. In the honesty of your own thoughts, how would you finish the following sentence? When I am in a church, any church, not just this one, and the time comes for the offering, I feel blank. Does a word come to mind? Maybe several words. If you're feeling like you need some nuance, perhaps think about the extremes, the best and the worst experiences you've had with offerings. When I am in a church and the time comes for the offering, I feel. Now comes the hard part. If you can, make eye contact with the person or people sitting next to you. Those who you would reach out to when the time comes to pass the bucket down the pew. And in a moment, I will ask you to, without needing to explain yourself or justify your feeling, share aloud with them what words came to mind just now. Turn to one side, then the other, to speak and to hear what each neighbor has to say in return. I think you'll find you are not alone. There's no need to analyze each other's feelings just now, only to hear them and lift them up into a shared space out of the isolation of our own heads. I'll give you a minute of space to turn and hear from each other. When I ring the chime a second time, it's time to stop talking. Don't worry, we can keep talking at social hour. From up here, I can only guess at what feelings were just shared. Perhaps, like me, you reflected on feeling self-conscious or awkward or worried, or perhaps those with more positive associations shared the feeling of being responsible or generous or fortunate. I hope that you will hold on to some of what was shared just now and continue to think and talk about the mix of feelings brought up by this brief and familiar part of our Sunday morning practice. I feel it is important to acknowledge that no one wants to come to church and feel manipulated or taken advantage of. And when religion and money mix, so often manipulation feels dangerously close at hand. We've all seen examples of religious communities asking too much of members already stretched thin. Religious leaders using collections to fund their own lavish lifestyles. Spiritual movements making impossible promises in exchange for followers' financial contributions. We know that this type of abuse is possible, so it's not wrong to take care, to have mixed feelings or wariness around the relationship of money and ritual. In fact, in this congregation, our real financial support comes in the form of pledges, a far more sober and budget-minded approach to raising funds. In the privacy of our own homes, we make the decision of what we will be able to give to the parish with no music, no fanfare, and with our wits entirely about us. But there's something about passing the plate. We keep doing it, week after week, even with all the complicated emotions. It means something to us to pass the basket hand to hand every Sunday, gathering up contributions. Perhaps a glimpse into our denominational past will provide some insight. Because when Unitarianism first came to be in Massachusetts, It was as a branch of Congregationalism, which was, in fact, the state religion. Which means that early Unitarian churches never had to collect offerings because they could rely on taxes to supply steady financial support. It was our Universalist ancestors who needed to scrape together funds to support preachers and buildings whenever they could. In this way, the collection plate became a sign of independence, freedom from governmental ties, a congregation's stubborn pride in its own self-sufficiency, a way to say we are the ones who make this happen because we think it's worth it. There's no one supporting us in this but ourselves, and every time we pass the basket, we keep choosing to make this community happen. Pride. Pride that we are a community that can afford abundance, pride in our ability and our commitment to sustaining the places and practices that are sacred to us. Is pride a word that came to mind earlier when we reflected on our own feelings? It wasn't for me, but I can't see why it shouldn't be. I am proud to be part of this congregation, and that pride extends to the offering. Every Sunday, we split our collections with a worthy cause chosen by our social action team, and since instituting the split plate, our portion going to First Parish has hardly wavered, which means that we are offering almost twice as much. You are offering almost twice as much. You should be proud. Today, when we pass the plate, and we will get to it, make no mistake, we'll be giving away half of our collection to the Unitarian Universalist Urban Ministry, which means funding support programs for kids in Boston, a shelter for families escaping violence, and a volunteer recruiting program that connects privileged and skilled volunteers with the nonprofits that need them. It's awesome. And no one needs to lean into guilt or obligation to feel excited about supporting a cause like that. I believe it is entirely possible to feel something during the offering other than awkwardness or obligation or routine. Imagine, if you will, the good feelings that come with seeing all the food laid out at a potluck dinner here in the parish hall. Everyone brings something to eat or drink, and each individual's offering becomes part of something bigger, disappearing into the abundant spread of desserts and salads and tinfoil-covered casseroles. At a potluck, everyone gives what they can and takes whatever they feel drawn to. There's no avoiding eye contact, no self-consciousness or judgment about what you couldn't contribute this time. And the true magic of a potluck, no matter how many helpings you go back for, there is always something left over. I have seen this with my own eyes. So can the Sunday morning basket be host to a miniature potluck every week? If we're going to continue this weekly ritual, which I believe we should, can we tap into the unself-conscious sharing that we so enthusiastically bring to our potluck dinners? When I knew I would preach about this topic, I thought of my own bad cashless habits and how it feels to be the odd one out when a community all comes together in a shared ritual. For that reason, I decided that every order of service today would include a $1 bill. It was the only way I could think of to make sure that everyone can participate if they choose to, which today feels very important. I'm not worried about getting every dollar back. If you need that dollar, please keep it. And please come see me after the service or during the week, because this is a generous congregation and we can support each other through difficult times. In just a moment, we will hear a song that I feel is so perfectly suited to everything we've shared so far. The ushers will come forward with their plates. My hope is that in today's offering, we take the chance to look at each other, to feel connected, included, proud, Really experience the feeling of sharing and gathering, participating in a community where there's enough for everyone, and even some left over. In the worship cafe, may the basket be passed, and here in the sanctuary, may the ushers please come forward. And ushers, remember to come to the front when you're done this time. Thank you, how beautiful. I am continually shocked and delighted by the generosity of this congregation. I know I say it every Sunday, but truly, thank you for supporting the work of this church. Let it be remembered that today you spoke complicated feelings aloud and you were heard. Let it be remembered that we don't need to ignore discomfort, that we are a free church with the power to define our own rituals and the obligation to think and care deeply about what we are doing and what it means. Look at what we can do. This is a capable, giving, caring community. I see it every day, including here and including now. This then is my blessing. May we speak the fears we've kept in silence. May we find the joy of the potluck in everything we share. May we give and take with self-assurance and trust. May we have enough for everyone and a little left over. May we live together in abundant community. Amen.